Greetings to our kings, queens, and everyone in between. Welcome to Melanin Muses.
Mindful knowledge, healing heart. We are your muses.
Cleo
and Calliope, but you can call me Callie. We're here to give you a safe space to open your mind
and to heal your heart while adding a dash of melanin flavor.
Disclaimer: we are not legal, mental, or health professionals. Although we're actively researching the topics we discuss and fact-checking our resources, please note that we are only giving our opinions and not professional advisory.
If you wish to get professional advice, please seek out the help of a certified professional or therapist. Let us begin. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Melanin Muses Podcast. And today we will be talking about the second portion of the Killing Stalking Korean Manhwa. In our previous episode, we did give you a ton of information, a ton of back history, in-depth stuff, conversation. But here we're going to finish it off because that was such a loaded topic. We felt that we needed to break it into two. And don't worry, this one will not be as long as the other one. We just had a lot to say and get out the way. And we're going to finish up nice in a pretty package, as pretty as it can get with this topic. So yes, I'm going to turn it over to Callie.
Callie. That's my name. I'm Callie, and I'm coming in today to tell you all about Killing Stalking Part 2.
I'm sorry, I almost called you Clarissa.
I might as well. Clarissa says it all today as you explain. Is it says it all, explains it all? I forgot, but it's something.
No, Clarissa explains it all. I think that's what it was.
Oh yeah, that darn show. Well, that's what I'm going to be today, because we're going to explain how this manga is not meant to be romantic, but unfortunately many people, like a fandom surrounding this manga, consider it to be romantic. So we're going to challenge that today. And also I'm going to share a call to action and how we can identify the signs of abuse and how to help heal from it with the help of my psychology today. But I do want to hit with a disclaimer before I get started. Again, today we will be discussing instances of abuse, sexual assault, murder, and all manner of traumatic instances under the guise of love. We are here today to explain and show that these are not loving acts. These are actually abusive acts that can be quite traumatic and detrimental to your health. So here's what to look out for. Now, when we left off, I was explaining the story of Yunbum, who is the small, statured, quiet, withdrawn, effeminate presenting main character within this manga, and Sung-woo, who is not a good guy at all. He's very big, domineering, and he's taken Yunbum hostage in his home. He has broken both of his ankles, and he is now making him dress in effeminate clothing as a way of emasculating him and making him feel less than and trapped. Now, Yunbum has been Sung-woo's captive for quite some time at this point in the manga. And he's been subjected to all manners of abuse, and that he's been made to believe that he's the housewife. He can't leave the home because of the injuries to his legs, so he's more or less stuck in at the whim of Sung-woo. And there was a part in the manga where Sung-woo comes home, and he just came back from Yunbum's house, where his apartment where he was staying previously. Yunbum's been captive for 3 months now, and his rent hasn't been paid. He's likely been spirited away, or that's the perception that a lot of people have. And he brought with him a bunch of his belongings to kind of give to him as a quote unquote a gift, which includes a pair of crutches. So Yunbum presents this to him as saying, "Here you go. I have a gift for you. We're going to get you to start walking again. Aren't I generous? Aren't I wonderful? Aren't I doting and lovely to you?" Because he's been more or less, quote unquote, caring for him this entire time by physically bathing him and dressing him and doing things that a caregiver would do for an injured loved one or family member. Now, I want to reiterate that none of these actions that he's performing in a caregiving perspective is loving. It's not helpful because he is the cause of the pain to begin with, and it should not be misinterpreted that way. So let's just touch on this really quickly. Instant intimacy is often followed by disillusion, so tread carefully. Just because someone is showing you a little bit of care and kindness after a long stretch of violence or negative behaviors doesn't mean that they've turned over a new leaf, doesn't mean that they are a good, kind person inherently. It just means that they're trying to convince you. So let me take a break for a minute. That's a lot of information to kind of absorb. So let's check in really quickly. Leo, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a little bit, it's crazy how, well, not crazy, but it's mind blowing how these strategies are often utilized more in everyday life than we actually realize. The aspect of it, well, it's also popular in other media as well, like the dude, just speaking from like the heterosexual relationships that I viewed in media and books of like, oh, the guy will just bully you, or like even if they teach you like, oh well, oh, if a boy like is mean to you or he bullies you, that means he likes you. So it kind of plays into that, oh, well, they're going to be a bully. And then they have one moment of niceness, maybe out of pity. And then you see that's like, oh my God, I love you type thing. Like I even saw that in a recent animation, what's it called? A Whisker Away. Have you seen that yet?
I've heard of it. I've been meaning to watch it.
It's like don't get me wrong, the animation is absolutely gorgeous. It's so beautiful, very 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 well done animation, very well done art. The only thing was like the story, it's in and of itself was really cringy. Like I understood the character psychologically, but just as this young girl, she becomes like, she has a rough household, so she tries to be very positive, but she becomes obsessed with this boy, and he treats her like kind of like crap, essentially. Like he's
Mm.
mean to her, he ignores her, he calls her annoying and frustrating, but she's obsessed with him because she can turn into a cat and he's kind to the cat, which is her. So like that moment
Oh.
of kindness,
Mhm.
of like, oh my God, he's being so nice to me. And oh my God, he's actually a really sweet person. But when she's a human, he doesn't treat her very kindly. But she's stuck in this idea of, but he's so nice to me, but he's so nice to me. He has these moments of niceness. It's kind of like this endless toxic cycle. But in this case, of like, dude physically broke his ankles, this dude physically harmed him, but he has those moments of like, no, I'm just kind. And it's like that emotional manipulation, it happens so often, more than we think, because we try, it's like that gaslighting. We don't know, we can't, like I've been in those situations, not this extreme, where the person that I was with was very toxic, very very toxic, and even to a point where I don't even think they understand what they're doing is wrong,
Mhm.
because it's such an innate part of them. And that probably is what the case is for this character as well. Like they inherently don't think that what they're doing is wrong. And they at this point, they just want to keep that person with them. So they're just like, okay, you pissed me off, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, but then I'm gonna have to be nice because I don't want you to leave me. And it's that
Mhm.
little like giving a dog a treat type
Yes.
thing,
Mhm.
and I feel that it's a very scary thing to not only be subjected to, but once you realize you're in that situation and then try to get out of that situation, I feel like it can be even 10 times scarier, because once you become aware of it, you're just like, well, crap. And then once you start recognizing the symptoms of these things, like you start recognizing the red flags, for another choice of terms, you start seeing it, like, I don't want to say everywhere, but you start noticing it, and it just starts to kind of, it takes a lot of effort not to taint your mindset of, well, I can't trust nobody then if they're going to be nice only behind closed doors to be like an abusive person. So
Yeah.
it's just, it can be overwhelming if you allow it to witness these things, to see these things happen, to experience these things. But if you have manga or media portraying these types of situations, if it's in a way to be educational, like, hey, this is what happens, be cautious, be wary of these particular signs of an abusive situation. But to be romanticized kind of like this is just, it boggles my mind. I don't understand how someone can find these, like, I can understand, but also it's still baffling once you're out of that mindset of, how did I ever think that this was romantic, when it's just so damaging to not only in this character's case his physical health, but
Mm-hmm.
his emotional and mental capacity. So yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, keep in mind that the character of Yudenbum has been subjected to such persistent trauma and abuse throughout his entire life that this is nothing new for him. This is familiar to him. I mean, maybe a little bit more extreme than what he's used to, but it's within the same ballpark. And I think that's what's so dangerous about this kind of portrayal as being romantic, is that just because you're used to something happening to you doesn't mean that it's good for you.
100%. And I think that's the biggest issue that a lot of us struggle with, is that, like, we get so used to the abuse that, like you said, it just becomes normal, it becomes commonality, to us, if that's even a word, but whatever. It just becomes so commonplace for us that we're just like, oh no, this is normal, this always happens. Like, if a person is in the, like, toxic relationship, from toxic to toxic to toxic relationship, that the moment they actually see or meet someone who's healthy, they freak out, because
Hmm.
it's like, oh no, 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 there's something wrong with this person, they actually care about me, or they're actually treating me gently, or they're actually not hitting me for once. That's it blows your mind, and it's something that I don't know, it's very mind-blowing. I have it's very difficult to articulate my feelings on this, especially coming from, like, a history with some situations that have happened. So there are, like, I can understand the feeling of the character, of feelings just
Hmm.
so, like, you feel stuck, you feel trapped, like you can't get any better than this particular person. Like, oh, if this person's going to love me, then I can't get any better because no one else will. So you end up
Hmm.
staying because you think
Yes.
that's all that you're worth. But then once you get out of that situation, it's like, well, I can't believe I allowed that to happen to me. Like, it's just a really weird position to be in. So I can empathize with the character. It's very difficult to see, like, how someone can admire this type of relationship when they can see it's obviously abusive, when in comparison to living it and be like, well, you don't understand that it is. So to see those two different perspectives is just very interesting, for a lack of better terminology at the moment.
It's it is. It's very concerning because relationship violence consists of acts and beliefs that rupture human connection and trust. So it's just as entrapment encapsulates the experience for victims and survivors, entitlement characterizes the experience for abusers. So, as a society, we tolerate abusers' excuses that perpetuate women's entrapment and excuses that include the perception of victim provocation. So, it's more so saying, like, well, she, or in this case, he deserved to be in this situation with his ankles broken in the home of someone else, that he broke into this person's home and got what he got because he shouldn't have been so enamored with this person, or he shouldn't have been. And that's victim blaming. There's no reason for him to be subjected to this kind of treatment. Pardon me. And there's no excuse for Songwoo's treatment of Yunbom. There's no reason for it. But that's why it's so important to be able to recognize what abuse looks like in its many forms. So we've got abuse can take on forms in physical, like hitting, kicking, biting, hair pulling, pushing, blocking exits, destroying property and precious objects like family heirlooms. If you have a family relationship partner who is punching holes in walls when they're angry at you, they're showing you that's intimidation. They're showing you that I'm so mad, this wall could be you. They're not redirecting their anger. They're not saying, oh, I have so much control that I can just turn away and not hit you. No, it's saying this wall could be you. So if you are around someone who is willing to destroy property out of anger, frustration, rage, or any other kind of strong emotion, that's abuse. That's not good. That's a situation that you should remove yourself from immediately. Emotional abuse includes name calling, mind games, and threats. If you have a relationship partner who is calling you mean names, like instead of a nice pet name like hey love, hey babe, hey beautiful, if they're calling you things like hey weirdo, hey stupid, hey bug, hey, like anything that makes you feel small or feel insignificant, that's emotional abuse. They're calling you how they think of you. And it's not cute, it's not funny, and it's not affectionate. That's not affectionate. Sexual abuse includes assault and rape, as well as coercion, pressure, threats, and sexual bargaining for things in return. Like we said in a previous episode, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And there's nothing anyone can say or do to you that can convince you otherwise. So, if you have a relationship partner that has to, if you're not 100% into what they're doing to you, that's sexual abuse. Financial abuse is putting someone in debt to you, closing accounts without their consent, giving an allowance, and then infantizing the other person. This also happens in killing stalking. They're trapping you in a situation by holding you hostage financially. That's abuse. And finally, neglect, withholding affection or attention. If your relationship partner ignores you when they're angry with you, or if you want to give them hugs and kisses and they blatantly tell you no consistently without explaining why, or giving you a reason as to why they're not being affectionate towards you back. It's very different than someone who's told you before that they're tired or or they're not feeling good today, or that maybe they just don't feel like being touched today. That's very different than completely neglecting you and just withholding emotion and affection for you. So those are the main forms of abuse that can manifest in romantic relationships. And unfortunately, in this manga, all of these are being displayed. So it is very difficult um, to recognize that, especially if it's being portrayed like in movies and in your favorite TV shows. Any one of these forms of abuse is not romantic. It is not healthy, especially if it's done consistently or on a continuous basis. So let's do another check in. That's a lot of information that I just threw up all over the microphone. So let's check in. How are you doing with this info, Cleo?
So I'm doing pretty well with this. It's interesting to hear because a lot of these things seem to be so normalized in our society. Even like here watching some of like the K dramas that I've had, like specifically, for example, Boys Over Flowers. That's another example of like high toxicity in terms of relationship. Like he had guys scared the crap out of her, like when she's by herself to try and go, she was gonna go swimming or something, and he hired these other students to go and like rough her up, and he's like watching and laughing while she's just physically assaulted, and yet she's still supposed to fall in love with him. Like he's just a boy trying to, he can't take no for an answer, and he basically torments her so bad. And it's such, I don't know. It's like this stuff is so normalized, and you don't recognize that it's normalized until you are able to step out and actually think about it. And it's sad Like, not like this goes both ways. Like, they normalize toxic things for men, like, oh, you guys have to be macho and strong and you can't feel. Like, how many times do we teach, like, do people teach their little boys, oh, you can't cry, you're a man, don't be showing your emotion, like crap like that. Like, it goes both ways. And also, like, I think I mentioned on another episode how they teach boys to just like treat women kind of like a target, like you're a predator and like they're the predator and we're the prey. And you have to do whatever you can to basically get your junk wet, Like, it's it's very startling how more people are not aware of how problematic all of these things are because they're just so prevalent. And I'm curious, like, to hear your thoughts on, like, why do you think that this behavior is basically condoned, like, by the movies that are the most popular, by the music videos and music we listen to that's so popular, by the books that are so popular. Like, wasn't it even like 50 Shades of Grey? Like, I heard that
Oh
that
God.
movie was very problematic because it wasn't actually um accurate to how the community actually operates, and it was just setting forward a very bad standard and a bad image to the BDSM community. Like, what are your thoughts of how normalized this is and how healthy relationships are considered just, oh, well, they don't exist? Like, have
Mm.
you had that as well? Like, oh yeah, I would like to have a partner who is empathetic, who can listen, who can communicate, who we can share experience together, we can do things together, and feel like that man doesn't exist, or that woman doesn't exist, or that person doesn't exist. So you're just like, you're getting your hopes up and having too high standards. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
So abuse in itself is damaging on various levels. So it's damaging to the body, the psyche, the heart, the spirit, one's moral core, and their wallet. So abuse and violence are not natural and inevitable aspects of intimate relationships. But abuse and control are embedded in the fabric of our society and in patterns of social relations so that they seem natural. And, you know, people like to think that abuse is like a one time thing. Oh, he hit me because he was angry about this, but he said he's not going to do it again. No, abuse is not episodic. It's patterned. So it exists in episodes when like the person believes that it's not going to happen again because it's not like consistent, like they're not hitting me every day, but they hit me like once in a blue moon. No, it's patterned. Like there was a trigger for that. And like people will often, give apologies and gifts and quick fixes and promises as a way of smoothing over what they just did. But like it's just it's troubling because like girls and women mostly are socialized to forge and maintain relationships almost at any cost, especially to themselves. Like that's why good girls and women are taught to do, like they create relationships and they make them work. So it's kind of ironic that at a time where a woman is most vulnerable in an abusive relationship, we're going to ask, why does she stay? Why doesn't she just leave? She's done what good women are taught to do. She is conformed to social standards. So she's at the highest risk of being killed by her partner when people insist on questions like that. And that's why it's so scary, because some of the reasons people stay in abusive and like coercive relationships is because they're in love with the person. They're in fear of the danger that can come with trying to leave. They're fearful that no one will believe them. They have children, they have money wrapped up in this relationship, their health or disability. And contrary to popular belief, unfortunately, disabled partners can be abusive as well. So that person might feel guilty leaving a disabled partner um, who is abusive toward them. They might have an immigration status, so they can't leave because of that. Religious upbringings, threats that the abuser makes about killing themselves or killing the other person. Racial loyalty is another big one. Black women often report that given the rate of incarceration of Black men, they don't want their dirty laundry to be aired. That's a big problem. Racial loyalty is a big issue when you talk about different groups of people. So it's a very complicated issue. It's not black and white. Most people don't recognize the signs, and even if they do, there are other complications that prevent them from leaving. So victim blaming is not the way to get someone to leave an abusive relationship. So before I get into a few ways we can help identify and possibly move forward, what are your thoughts about that, Cleo?
I think that that um those are very good reasonings as to why people end up staying in relationships, because um there are many times when people just say, like, even I had those moments back in the day where I was clouded. It's like, oh, why don't they just leave if they're doing this and they're just doing that? It just makes no sense, because that's our natural, I think, instinct of like, well, I would just get up and leave. But at the end of the day, we don't people don't really put into consideration the the emotional aspect to it, the physical connection to it, like the mental connection to it. Like when you're so immersed in that environment, people don't understand how tied you are to it. So even though you can literally just get up and leave, in some cases the emotional manipulation is just so strong. It's like you feel like you have no power. It's like you feel like you're bound even if there's nothing there. It's like an invisible chain that's just keeping you there. So it's it's best to be kind, be understanding. And if you have a friend or someone that you know who is in a toxic or abusive relationship, at least from my thoughts, like the best thing isn't to just tell them, well, just leave or just get up and I just don't understand, and just be aggressive. But like, don't be aggressive about it. Try to come from a more understanding perspective of like, okay, well, like I understand, like your feelings are valid, like I can understand why you love this person. However, are they treating you right? How do you feel like when they're treating you that way? Is that scary? Like, do you have more of those bad moments than you do the good moments? Like, you have to talk about it from a different perspective, because the more you try to force them, the more they try to keep. Some people tend to retreat more into that relationship when they feel threatened by the people that they love outside of the
Mhm.
relationship. So you think you could be helping them, as like, just get up and leave, or you could unintentionally be pushing them more into the safety, the illusion safety of that relationship. So I
Mhm.
would definitely encourage you to just come from a more understanding and empathetic approach, rather than just telling them, I don't understand, just get up and leave, because not everyone has the capacity to do that, because you don't know what goes on behind these closed doors. It could be a lot worse than what they're telling you, because
Mhm.
sometimes people who are victims of this, they will only disclose certain things that they're not too shameful about, so just be careful with your words and be gentle with your approach, so that way you don't really scare people more into these situations.
Completely agree with that. And a few other suggestions and resources that I'm taking from the Psychology Today Psychology Today article. Um, it might be helpful to help the person identify and name the abuse. People tend to dance around the issue. They can make a lot of excuses, but you can help them identify the reasons for abuse as excuses. Like, ask them what their concerns are about their situation. Ask them specific questions in a non threatening way to show them that this behavior is abusive. Help them create a timeline so they can see the patterns and the cycles, because sometimes when you're in it, you can't see the bigger picture. Sometimes you need someone on the outside to help you see what's actually going on. And consider the victim as an expert. They know what's happening to them. You can't tell them what's happening to them because they know what's happening to them. So treat them as if they are the expert of their situation, because they are. Talk to the person talk to the person away from the abuser. If you can get them alone or get them away from that person's influence, you might have an easier time helping to convince them that this situation is not good for them. And don't assume that the abuser is male until you are told the gender of the person. That's another common mistake we make, is that we believe the abuser is male immediately. No, women can be abusers too. In fact, they can be more abusive in the covert way, either financially or emotionally, rather than the physical or neglectful as well. So you have to let the survivor of the abuse set the pace and tone for these conversations. Because if you try to rush them, they're going to feel threatened again. If you go too slowly, they're going to feel as though they're not being heard or understood. And ultimately, provide this person with as many resources and information as possible, kind of like the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and suggest that this person find a counselor, especially trained in the dynamics of relationship violence, because they do need professional help. Sometimes you need a professional to help you navigate these situations, especially if they're unfamiliar to you or you've been entrenched in them so long that you don't even recognize that it's not good for you. I think Killing Stalking does a very good job of displaying what relationship violence looks like in its many forms, and should not be conflated with any kind of love, intimacy, or romance. So if you have the stomach for it, feel free to look it up, but I wouldn't recommend it because it does get mighty dark. And that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, yeah, like personally I couldn't stomach it. I looked up a couple screenshots and like Google images, and it was very difficult to look at. But if you are interested from a psychological perspective and analytical perspective, and have, like Callie said, have the stomach for it, Killing Stalking is definitely a good example of what not to want in a relationship, or what not to perceive as something romantic. So just a nice way to kind of clean that up. I know the first episode we talked more about the specifics of the episode. At least this one, we wanted to share with you some more just kind of specific examples outside of that context, and then how you can recognize and then move on from that, or help somebody else move on from that. So with that said, we would like to say thank you for listening to this episode and joining us on our podcast, and continuing to listen to us in future episodes. So on that note, this is Cleo.
And this is Callie.
We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Hey everyone, Cleo here, and thank you for joining us on this episode of the Melanin Muses Podcast. We are so thankful for you giving us your time and your attention to listen to what we have to say every week. So thank you so much. Now I'm here because I'd like to share a quote that I think sums up this week's episode rather nicely, in my opinion at least. So, the quote for the week is, "When I look back on my life, I see pain, mistakes, and heartache. When I look in the mirror, I see strength, learned lessons, and pride in myself." Now, to any abuse survivors or current abuse victims listening today, I hope you know that what happened to you is not your fault. It is not your fault at all. And you are stronger than you realize, and you are worth more than how you've been treated. Do not allow anyone to take your shine and to take your light away. You deserve the world. And we are here to remind you that you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Bye!
Callie here. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. To continue listening to us, like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel. If you want some behind the scenes content, the links to our social media channels are in the description box below. Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Search Melanin_Muses. That's MELANIN_MUSES.
Muses. See you guys next week.